I was trying to get help. I was trying to get help. I was trying to get help.
I know he was.
He says, I didn't realize that when I was suffering, my mom was suffering too.
Yeah,
Your
that's
son,
one thing I struggle with is why couldn't I reach him? Why couldn't I help?
Tara, did you lose somebody of the overdose here in this world?
Yeah, my son passed.
And did he also have struggles with addictions here in the physical?
I know he was doing different drugs at the time. His major thing for me was he suffered PTSD.
Anytime that soul comes through, all right, I know that this is who it is, and I'm going to tell you why. And there's a lot of things I'm going to tell you that might make you upset, but I got to tell you what he tells me. And he kept saying to me, I have to tell my family, I was trying to get help. I was trying to get help. I was trying to get help.
I know he was.
He says to me, he was seeing somebody, or he was planning on seeing somebody, he shows me. He's showing me a pamphlet in front of me. You know, when you go to the doctor's office and they have like a pamphlet and it says like, are you suffering? And he like from this, and this, and it lists the symptoms. He's showing that to me. I'm going to tell you right now, he's here. And when I see visions of doctor's appointments, that's his way of acknowledging that he did plan on seeing somebody. I know without a doubt that that's the reason why he's coming through, because when I'm connecting with your son, I feel like I have two personalities. Sometimes he was completely normal and he was fine and he was motivated and he felt like everything was good. And he's like, I'm going to get past this. I'm going to get better. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And he also, I see him online researching things. So I see him like researching his condition, trying to find out about PTSD. Like I said, I even see doctors when I keep seeing a screen and I see this pamphlet. So that means to me that he was trying to get better and he was trying to figure out a treatment plan for him, because I see that.
I believe that.
But the hardest thing was, he says, my thoughts would get a hold of me. He says, and I would literally forget who I was. Because I see your son that he would deal with these roller coasters of emotions. And this was rage that he would get. He calls it sudden rage. That's what he tells me. He shows me him getting upset. One of the things that comes up with him is that he says to me, Matt, I felt every time this would come on me, I felt like I couldn't live a normal life. He says, because he shows me that there were times when literally this rage would keep him up where he wouldn't be able to sleep for 3 days. I see him not being able to sleep. I see him having insomnia. I see him when I'm connecting, doing all these things, just trying to escape his emotions. Because I asked him, I said, did you have an addiction? And he said to me, no. But he says to me, Matt, I'd be lying if I didn't say that I tried everything under the sun. He says to try to stop the emotions of what I was feeling. I see him drinking. I see him using drugs. I see him using marijuana. I see him using a lot of different substances when I'm connecting. But he says to me, Matt, he says, all I was doing was trying to calm down my mind. He says, I would think things that weren't true. And he's acknowledging that. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've done many readings for people who had passed of PTSD. This one's very different. And it's different because I also see that there's part of the brain that was affected with your son. He showed me there was an issue with his brain. Do you know if he had at one point a concussion?
They said he had some kind of a head trauma, but
that's what it is. I'm telling you right now as a medium, okay? Did your son have PTSD? Absolutely. But there was something else that was going on. And I'm asking your son what was happening, because he showed me his head. And at first, when he showed me his head, I thought he was talking about the depression. And then he showed me it was like a concussion. There was some type of either trauma or something that happened with his head. I feel that this was not just him dealing with an emotional thing. This went far beyond that. I believe what I'm seeing, what your son is showing me, is that at one point, he also had, like I said, either a concussion or some type of trauma that was here, because he's showing me that. And I believe that that's part of what was responsible for his passing, because he says to me, you know, with the medications that he was on, nothing would break through for him. It's like nothing would work in the way that it should, because he shows me testing different medications out and not finding relief. Normally when I deal with, when I read people with PTSD and they deal with PTSD, I'll ask them certain questions like, were you taking your medications? Did you take them correctly? Did you do this? Did you do that? And they'll say to me, no. When I'm asking your son, he goes, Matt, I would have tried anything. I would have taken them. He goes, if the medications work, I would have stayed on them. I would have done this. I would have done that. He said, I want my mom to know that I wasn't lying. I want her to know that I tried everything. And he's bringing that. And first of all, I have to say to you that he wants to let you know that he's sorry. What's so tough is that you feel, how come my son didn't get in touch with me? How come he didn't reach out to me before this had happened? And he said to me, Mom, I always did. There were no secrets between us. He says to me that anytime something was happening, anytime something that was going on within his life, he knew that he could call you. He knew that you wouldn't judge him. He knew that you would try to help him in any way possible. And he is literally showing me that there were times when you would go and talk to him for hours and hours and hours on end. And you would try to calm him down. He says, please tell my mom that I want to thank her for giving so much of her life to me. What's so tough is about what you felt. Because he says to me, Matt, there's one thing I didn't take into consideration. He says, I didn't realize that when I was suffering, my mom was suffering too. Because as his mother, you were like, I can't watch this. I don't know how else to help my son. We've done everything.
Your son, one thing I struggle with is, why couldn't I reach him? Why couldn't I help him?
Your son said to me when you reached him many times and you gave him so many different options. Yeah. He says, and Matt, he says, the one thing is, he says, I have to tell my mom the truth. I didn't get in touch with her when I died because I didn't want to be stopped, he tells me. Oh. And I was overwhelmed. When your son passed, he tells me that he passed in a fit of rage here in the physical.
Yes, I do know that. He was in one of his rage modes. Yeah.
He says, so please, Matt, he says, tell my mom no, let my mom know that I wasn't thinking about anybody when I passed. He says, all I was thinking about was how to make this stop, how to make this anger stop, how to make this hurt stop, how to make this frustration stop. But I also have to bring something up as well. That's tough to bring up, but I got to tell you, throughout your son's life, he tells me that he always needed so much of you. It's almost like you used to always put your son under your wing here in this world. And that you always used to give him so much of your attention. He says, me and my mom, he says, we used to talk every day. We were so connected. He says, and now what I really want is her to stay close with my sister. Because he tells me a lot of times you as his sister, you were pushed to the background, not because of the fact that your mom doesn't love you or care about you, but because, you know, all of your brother's problems, everything that went on in his life far exceeded what you were going through in yours. And it's like, he always took out all of this attention. He always needed all of his mom's attention. He says, I didn't even realize this. He says, I didn't even realize what I was doing. He says, I didn't even realize how bad it had gotten. He says, the relationship that I had with my mother, he says, what we went through together is something that I will never forget. He says, I couldn't pay back all the hours that she sat back, talked to me, was there for me, counseled me, did everything for me. He says, and the one person who really suffered was my sister. He says, even though I'm not here in this world, I don't want my mom to grieve. He says, because I don't want her taking any more time away from my sister. I don't want her taking any more time away from our relationship, because still to this day, his sister, your daughter, is dealing with the pain of his loss and at the same time watching you grieve as well. He says, and Matt, I just want her to have good things happen within her life. He says, I just want mom to celebrate the good things that are going on with her. He says, we spent so much about my life when I was here about me. He says, Mom, please make it about her too. Your son tells me that you said, if I just knew my son was okay, if I just knew that finally he was at peace, that I could be able to live my life again. But at the end of the day, it's you who has to make the decision to heal. Mm-hmm. And your son says to me that that's what it's so important today. It's about making that decision, getting close with your daughter. He says, and Matt, please tell my mom to bring the family back together.
Okay, I'll do my best to do that.
He says, everybody's been hurting for far too long. And can I just come over to his sister as well? Can I please just let you know that your brother is a guardian angel watching over you as well? Mm-hmm. Because he knows that your relationship wasn't perfect all the time. But he says, Matt, please let her know that this was not because, he says, I didn't love her. He says, there were other things that just consumed me. He says, I know that she's tired of hearing of that, but I just have to let her know one thing, Matt. He says, I just have to let her know I do care about her. And I do have to let her know that I'm watching over her every day. He says, and all the pain that you watched your brother go through, the demons that he was fighting, all of the problems that he went through, he says, that ends today. Let it end today. Don't talk about my problems anymore. He says, because I'm completely at peace. So if I'm at peace, he says, you can be at peace as well. I really hope that this helped you. And I really hope that these tools give you and the family what you need to start to heal.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna leave you guys with that.